Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. Princess Carlotta. Forbidden love or tragic destination? Discover the heartbreaking story of a Belgian princess who challenged conventions for love, paying the highest price. Subscribe and activate the bell so as not to miss anything. We talked about Carlotta de Belgica, a princess born within a European real family, surrounded by luxuries and privileges. His life, however, was marked by a tragedy that would reach it too soon. Imagine your childhood, full of dances, label lessons, and your family's company. But behind the facade of royalty, a young heart was beating with their own desires and dreams. A young woman who sought something beyond the walls of the palace. Carlotta grew under the watchful eye of his family, prepared for marriage and fulfilling his duty as a member of royalty. The portraits of the time show her as a woman of captivating beauty, with a look that reflected both innocence and a deep melancholy. His life, despite opulence, was full of the pressures and expectations imposed by his position. Despite her privileged life, Princess Carlotta yearned for a true love, a love that transcended social conventions and real responsibilities, a love that, ironically, would lead her to a tragic end, an end that would make her a legendary figure, remembered for her courage and sacrifice. His brief existence, however, left an indelible mark on history. Imagine, for a moment, the 19th century Belgium, a newborn country, still finding its place on the map of Europe. After centuries under the domain of other powers, Belgium had become independent, but stability was a fragile dream. The monarchy, recently established, faced constant political tensions, with different factions fighting for the power and control of the future of the country. Industrial development began to take its first steps, generating an increasingly complex and divided society. The Belgian society was divided between the rich and powerful elite, the growing urban middle class, and a mostly peasant rural population, with deep economic and social inequalities. The language was also a source of conflict, with tensions between Francophones and Flamenco, which reflected the cultural and political differences of the time. This context of change and tension, of struggles of power and inequalities, formed the scenario in which Carlotta lived his privileged life, but not immune to the realities of his country. Remember that this young princess, despite her privileged position, was not alien to the political and social instability of her time. Industrial growth, although promising, also generated new forms of poverty and marginalization. The tensions between the different social classes and the linguistic conflicts were a constant backdrop in Carlotta's life, a context that undoubtedly influenced his destiny. And it is precisely this context that makes its history even more fascinating and tragic. In that melting pot of new hopes and former rivalries, you find Leopold I, the first king of the Belgians, a cunning man, forged in the Napoleonic Wars, who built his kingdom based on pragmatism and strategic alliances. His wife, Louisa de Orleans, came from a French real family, full of history and with her own secrets and ambitions. Look how the Belgian court became a scenario of palatial intrigues, where every movement, each smile, hid a political calculation. His son, Leopold II, heir to the throne, was a fascinating and contradictory character. Ambitious to the core, it was projected as a powerful and modern king, but his methods often brushed cruelty. Observe their political decisions, their plans for colonial expansion in Africa, and how these actions molded the image of the Belgian monarchy and projected a dark shadow on their legacy. And then there were his daughters, princesses who embodied the fragility and strength of the time. Their lives, between the luxury and the restrictions of the court, were marked by the expectations of political marriage and the weight of tradition. Note how each of them sailed its destiny in a world that demanded obedience and sacrifice, defining its roles within the complex family dynamics. Thus, the Belgian royal family, although it seemed a symbol of power and stability, was actually a melting pot of hidden ambitions, silent and secret rivalries that would soon come to light. Remember that behind the facade of royalty, human dramas were hidden as intense as those of any other family, but with a much greater reach. On the shoulders of Leopoldo I, you see a little Carlotta grow within Belgian royalty. Imagine its early years, surrounded by luxuries and protocols, but also of a complex family. His education, like any princess of his time, focused on arts, music, dance, and good ways. It was a rigid formation, aimed at making it a worthy heiress of the crown, an impeccable queen. Prosody, Speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. Despite the rigidity, Carlotta was not a simple doll. You discover that he had a living intelligence and an insatiable curiosity that he read voraciously, was interested in history and politics, demonstrating a much more restless mind than the protocol allowed. That thirst for knowledge, that rebel spark, differentiated it from the other princesses of its generation. In secret, I dreamed with a future beyond the confines of the palace. His musical education was especially prominent. You imagine it by touching the piano with an exceptional skill, interpreting classic pieces with a passion that revealed his sensitive soul. Music became his shelter. An escape to the constant pressure of the court. It was a form of expression that allowed him to connect with his deepest emotions, emotions that an uncertain future threatened to suffocate. But little Carlotta did not just grow between palace walls. From a young age, it radiated a natural charm that captivated everyone who knew her. Her beauty, of course, was undeniable, but it was her personality that made her truly special. I had an innate grace, an easy smile and a penetrating look that left you breathless. She was intelligent, curious, and possessed a naturalness that differentiated her from other princesses from her time. Her intelligence and eagerness to learn made her a young, cultured, and refined woman. He dominated several languages, enjoyed reading and arts, and was interested in the politics and affairs of his country. He was not a simple decorative princess. She was a woman with an acute mind and an opinion of her own, which made her even more fascinating. Its impact on Belgian society was considerable. She was admired for her beauty, but also for her intelligence, her charity, and her commitment to others. It was often seen involved in beneficial works, showing a deep compassion for the less fortunate. His presence in public events was always an event, and his image became a symbol of elegance and refinement of the time. But let's go back to Carlotta. His life, until then, had been a fairy tale, but fate had prepared a new page. In a casual encounter, or perhaps not so accidental, he appeared. Alberto de Sajonia-Coburg-Gotha, a prince, yes, but one very different from those that inhabited the lavish European cuts. He was a cultured man, reserved, with a subtle charm that contrasted with the exuberance of his surroundings. He was a prince in the shadow, an insightful observer, a sensitive soul that was hidden after a quiet and elegant appearance. His personality, so different from that of the usual suitors, caught Carlotta's attention. Perhaps it was his discretion that attracted her. The possibility of a genuine connection beyond the rigid royalty labels. Imagine the scene. He, watching her with a penetrating but kind look, she, radiant as always, but with a hint of mystery in her eyes, aware of the look that followed her. A silent encounter, full of promises and also a shadow of tragedy that nobody was still glimpsed. Alberto was not an ostentatious prince. He preferred the book of the books to that of the courtesan, the intellectual conversations to the lavish dances. He was a man of principles, with an impeccable moral qualities that, despite his discreet presence, resonated strongly in a superficial and often corrupt world. His arrival in Carlotta's life was like a fresh breeze, a breath of pure air in the suffocating atmosphere of European royalty. A perfect counterpoint to its beauty and charm. Imagine the scene. A guest-crowded room, classical music echoing in the air, and you, watching Carlotta, radiant in a blue silk dress. His gaze is crossed with Alberto's, a young prince of intense and penetrating look. A fleeting silence, a spark in the air, and the world around it fades. That moment. The attraction is undeniable, an arrow that breaks all barriers. Despite the difference in status and the political complexities surrounding their lives, the connection between them was undeniable. Furtive conversations, stolen looks, and casual encounters that became unforgettable moments. Love flourished in secret, a forbidden romance that fed their hearts. Each encounter was a risk, a risky bet against social conventions and court expectations. But love, in its intensity, gave them strength to challenge the norms and surrender to such a powerful as forbidden. The secret was his complicity, his refuge, his promise. But his love was not destined to be easy. Carlotta's family, the powerful Belgian royalty, vehemently opposed its relationship. For them, Alberto was an unacceptable match. Not only was it of a lower social class, but it also came from a country considered rival, generating political and social fears. Prosody, speak. Speak, the prosody rate equals 90%. The political differences between Belgium and Saxony-Coburg-Gotha were an important obstacle. A marriage between Carlotta and Alberto could destabilize international alliances and compromise Belgium's position on the European stage. The royal family saw Alberto as a threat to his power and prestige, not as a possible son-in-law. In addition, the difference in social status was a determining factor. For the royal family, marriage was a political and economic tool, a way to strengthen alliances and consolidate its power. Alberto did not meet the standards of wealth and lineage that they expected for a husband of Princess Carlotta. His love faced the rigid social hierarchy of the time. But the real obstacle was his own grandfather, King Leopold II. A powerful and calculating man, Leopoldo saw in Alberto, a prince of a small German state, a threat to his influence and stability of his kingdom. For him, the union between Carlotta and Alberto was a scandal that should be avoided at all costs, an unthinkable alliance that would stain the prestige of the Belgian crown. Leopoldo used all his influence to separate the lovers, Palacige's intrigues, family pressures, and a campaign of discredit against Alberto were his weapons. Rumors spread about Alberto's alleged mental instability and his hidden political ambitions. Leopold assured that every step Carlotta gave in the direction of Alberto was an almost insurmountable obstacle. Leopold's obstinacy was relentless. For him, Carlotta's marriage with Alberto represented a threat to his power and the image he wanted to project from his kingdom. His refusal to accept the union became an impassable wall for lovers, a wall of oppression and disappointment built with the influence of the king and the pressure of the court. Carlotta's health began to deteriorate under the weight of pressure and sadness. The Brussels court buzzed with the rumors. You know, those whispers in the halls, the furtive looks, the anonymous letters that reached the right hands. The relationship between Carlotta and Alberto was the main theme. A silent scandal that grew with every day that passed. It was commented that Leopoldo II, with his political cunning, was orchestrating a discredit campaign against both, sowing doubts about Alberto's loyalty and Carlotta's sanity. Some said that Alberto was a spy, an undercover agent with hidden intentions. Others claimed that Carlotta was crazy about love, blinded by an impossible romance, ignoring her family's warnings and the court. The comadres, as always, had their own version of the story, full of extravagant details and exaggerations, turning romance into an operetta of secrets and lies. The press, eager for scandals, echoed rumors, further feeding the fire. Anonymous articles, open letters, veiled insinuations, everything contributed to creating an atmosphere of suspicion and distrust of the couple. For you, imagine the pressure on Carlotta, the weight of real expectations colliding with your desire to love freely. It must have been unbearable. But that clandestine happiness had a price. You imagine the pressure. To be a princess of Belgium, heiress of a crown, with the eyes of all of Europe put on you, each movement, every word, each sigh, analyzed, judged, commented, the court, an intrigue's hotbed, where political alliances were woven and weaning with the same ease that silk dresses were sewn. Your family, Belgian royalty, pushed you towards marriages of convenience, strategic alliances that would ensure the power and stability of the kingdom. They saw you as a piece on a political chessboard, a key figure in the great European game, and your personal happiness, your love for Alberto, was considered a luxury that the kingdom could not afford. Society, on the other hand, watched you with a mixture of fascination and scrutiny. You were an icon, a public figure that had to maintain an impeccable image, an image that often collided with your deepest wishes. The social pressure to settle for the expectations of the time, to give up your love, was immense. You must be the perfect princess, the worthy heiress, and not a woman in love. Each furtive encounter, every stolen look, was a challenge to the rigid court label. You imagine the weight of the queen's gaze, of the nobles who whispered behind them, judging their love as an affront to tradition, a stain in the impeccable real lineage. The pressure was immense, a constant threat that planned about his secret romance. The letters that were sent, full of promises and yearnings, became evidence of their betrayal. Each clandestine encounter was a risk, a commitment to discretion and luck. The possibility of being discovered, to face the anger of his family and the condemnation of society, was a sword of Damocles on his heads. Prosody, speak. Speak, prosody rate equals 90%. The love they felt became a double-edged sword, a fire that burned with intensity but also threatened to consume them. Society, with its relentless judgment, saw them as an anomaly, a scandal that should be silenced. The pressure for her to give up her love, her happiness, was constant and overwhelming. You imagine the weight of that invisible crown she carried, the responsibility of ensuring the stability of her kingdom, the pressure of her family, anxious for a strategic alliance. Each stolen kiss with his beloved was an act of rebellion, a betrayal of that duty that weighed as a slab in his chest. How to balance passionate love with the unavoidable obligation of a fixed marriage that could save your nation. The family duty, that invisible monster that fed on conventions and expectations, pushed her towards a future she did not want out of marriage to a powerful prince. A future ensured for his kingdom, but a future without the man he loved at it was a choice between his heart and his duty, between love and responsibility, and the balance was dangerously leaned towards the side of duty. The queen, with her penetrating gaze, constantly reminded her of her position, her role in society. Each advice, each subtle reprimand, was a reminder of the sacrifice that was expected of it. The weight of the crown, the weight of responsibility, the weight of the expectation of an entire people, joined the pain of their broken heart. Could a simple love story survive such pressure? But what happened to King Leopold II's mind? You imagine the fury contained, the disappointment before a daughter who dared to challenge her will. He, the man who built an empire, who molded the fate of an entire country, faced the disobedience of his own blood. His plan, so carefully tissue, was undone to Carlotta's stubbornness. The alliance with Mexico, so vital for its ambitions, staggered. Court pressure was immense. Ministers whispered, intrigas were woven in the halls of the palace. Leopold II, accustomed to controlling every detail, looked helpless at the love of his daughter. It was not just a policy issue. It was a challenge to his authority. A crack on the facade of his power. He had to make a decision that would mark Carlotta's fate forever. And he took it. Freya, calculator, irrevocable King Leopold II, with the same precision with which he directed his colonies, rejected Carlotta's request. There would be no real blessing for its union with Maximiliano. The weight of the crown, the responsibility of the kingdom, the image of the monarchy. All that weighed more than the love of a daughter. For him, the stability of the kingdom was put to any personal feeling. The king's refusal was a devastating blow to Carlotta. Imagine the weight of disappointment, the frustration of a broken dream. His heart, before full of illusion with his beloved, now sank into a sea of sadness. The court of the court, his father's reprobative gaze, everything contributed to intensify his pain. Real rejection was not just a negative marriage, it was a denial of its own happiness. Loneliness became his faithful companion. Isolated in the opulence of the court, but deeply alone in its suffering, Carlotta took refuge in melancholy. Palacigo's holidays and events, formerly a source of joy, were now a constant reminder of their loss. Every look, every conversation, was a stab in his broken heart. The life he had dreamed vanished before his eyes. Carlotta's health began to deteriorate. Heartbreak, family pressure, and deep sadness undermined their physical and mental strength. The joy and brightness that radiated before went out, giving way to a deep melancholy that consumed her slowly. His body reflected the suffering of his soul, a clear testimony of the price he paid for loving who he should not. His world crumbled, and with him, his health. Sadness settled in his bones, a constant oppression that stole his breath. Remember those nights in Candle, the dry cough that shook her, the deep fatigue that kept her prostrated in bed, a body that weakened, a reflection of the agony of his soul. The appetite disappeared, leaving behind a deep weakness. Each small effort became a titanic task. Imagine the difficulty to simply get up, to walk a few steps. His reflection in the mirror was no longer that of a radiant princess, but that of a young woman consumed by the penalty. Physical illness was just a symptom of a much greater evil. The deep disappointment that fits his heart, that open wound, the impossibility of being with the man he loved, manifested himself in each sigh. In each weak beat of his heart it was a pain that extended beyond his body, a suffering that consumed it inside. Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. The doctor visited her daily, her increasingly worrying diagnoses. Remember the smell of medicines, the bitter taste in your tongue, the sensation of ice in your veins. The treatments were rudimentary, bloody, home remedies, herbal infusions, Nothing seemed to stop the implacable advance of the disease. Seeing your loved ones with their eyes full of despair was worse than the disease itself. You struggled to smile, to give them an appearance of strength that you did not feel. But the exhaustion was total, the body failed you. Each breathing was an effort, each movement cost you a silent agony. The dry cough tear your throat, nights without rest, a torment that lasted endless. The battle against the disease became increasingly uphill. You remember the despair in your family's eyes, the impotence of doctors before your suffering. The traditional remedies were exhausted, hope won with every day that passed. The weight of the disease crushed you, but inside you, a spark of life resisted becoming extinguished, clinging to the hope of a miracle, of a different end to the one that was coming. You remember the growing weakness, the difficulty to breathe, each inhalation a titanic effort. The pain became constant, an oppressive weight that anchored you to bed. Your skin, formerly smooth and bright, now pale and cold to touch. The fever consumed you, a slow fire that weakened you inside. The days became a blurred succession of pain and exhaustion. The weight of your body crushed you, every movement a torture. The delusion seized you, confusing images and fragmented dreams assaulted you in the gloom of your room. You don't feel like food anymore, the taste of anything mixed with the bitter memory of medicines. Your body rebelled, every heartbeat a reminder of your fragility. The cough tear your chest, a dry and persistent cough that left you breathless. The weakness was overwhelming, every little effort was completely exhausted. Life escaped your fingers like sand in your hands. And so, loneliness became your inseparable partner. The visits became scarce, the conversations, whispered whispers. The castle, once a place of bustle and joy, now resonated with the echo of your silence. A silence that became more and more disturbing. The walls, mute witnesses of your suffering, seemed to close on you, accentuating the emptiness that extended around you. You remember the look distant from the maids, the sadness contained in their eyes. They were comprehensive, but the disease pain had been separated from life, from the court, from everything that used to make sense before. The isolation was cruel, an invisible wall that separated you from others, even from those who loved you. The distance, physical and emotional, became increasingly unbearable. Silence wrapped you like a shroud, amplifying every beat of your heart, every whisper of your body. Time seemed to stop, every hour stretched until eternity, while the disease undermined your strength, your hope. Only pain and loneliness accompanied you in that agonizing wait, in that descent towards darkness. The isolation, beyond the disease, became an immaterial prison, a cruel conviction. The castle, before an echo of laughter, was now a silent mausoleum. Your health, already fragile, began to deteriorate quickly. The doctors, with their long faces and their ambiguous diagnoses, could only confirm what you already intuited. Your time was exhausted. Sadness had taken over you completely, an unavoidable weight that consumed you slowly, day after day. Physical pain was mixed with unbearable existential anguish. Each respite was an effort, every heartbeat, a reminder of your imminent final. The loneliness, your faithful companion, intensified, becoming an oppressive presence that enveloped you in his glacial hug. In those final moments, what did you think? Did you regret something? Finally, the day that nobody wanted to see came. Surrounded by few people, in the cold solemnity of your room, you closed your eyes for the last time. At such an early age, death snatched you, leaving behind an immense vacuum, a silent echo of what it could have been. Your story, a tragedy wrapped in a halo of forbidden romanticism, was recorded forever in the annals of history. Its history, an echo over time, transcended the cold walls of the castle. You, like many, wonder, what is Carlotta? His forbidden romance, a lighthouse in the dark of the rigid European court, became a symbol of heartbreaking love, a fairy tale with a tragic end, a love that challenged conventions, which resonated in later generations, transforming it into an iconic figure. Prosody. Speak. Speak, the prosody rate equals 90%. The passage of time did not dull his memory. Its history leaked to popular culture, inspiring novels, poems, operas, and even films. That I imagine that you have found your name in a book or film that speaks of forbidden love, sacrifices, and the weight of tradition. She became the muse of artists, poets and writers who sought to capture the intensity of a convicted love. Even today, his name evokes a mixture of compassion and admiration. His tragic story has become a reminder of the power of love, a love that transcends social and political barriers. It is the story of a woman who chose her heart over reason, a sacrifice that immortalized her in history. You can feel the resonance of its history in romantic literature, in classical tragedies, and in the love stories that surround us. But how did Carlotta really die? That is the question that has persecuted historians and lovers of history for centuries. The official version speaks of a disease, a fulminant pneumonia that snatched it in the flower of life. However, you, who have entered its history, know that things are not always what they seem. There are other theories, whispers in the halls of time, which point to something more sinister. Some point to a possible poisoning, a deliberate act to silence a princess who loved an enemy of the empire. Imagine a glass of wine, a sweet, a silent and fast ending, perfect to hide a state crime. Others, more daring, even suggest that it could be suicide, a desperate exit to an impossible love and a hopeless future. The lack of complete medical records feeds these speculations. Official documents are scarce, incomplete, or simply missing. Was it a conspiracy to hide the truth, or simply the negligence of an era in which medicine was much less precise? The truth, like Carlotta herself, remains in the gloom, a mystery wrapped in the romanticism and tragedy of a last century. But let's go to the cards. They are the key, right? Dozens of letters written by Carlotta, full of an overflowing passion for someone considered an enemy of his family. In them, there is not only a story of a forbidden love, but also a deep sadness, a despair that filters between lines, like a whisper in the wind. Imagine trembling calligraphy, choppy words, blurred ink for tears. Analyzing their words, historians have been able to rebuild a clandestine love story, of poachers under the shadow of the court, a love that challenges social conventions and rigid norms of the time. In each phrase, the risk that ran, the anguish of clandestinity, the constant fear of revelation is perceived. But also, the unwavering force of her love, a force that drove her to move forward despite the danger. The letters reveal a complex woman, full of contradictions, a princess educated on the royal label, who rebels against the expectations of his surroundings to follow his heart. A woman capable of a passionate love, but also of a deep despair before the impossibility of her union. In its last letters, despair becomes more palpable. The disease that consumes it seems to be reflected in the writing itself, increasingly weak, more uncertain. But who was Alberto? A shattered prince? Yes, but also a deeply in love man. Carlotta's letters reveal an intense connection, a complicity that challenged the conventions of the time. I imagine Alberto reading those words, every line a stab to the heart, every phrase an echo of a forbidden love that now became an indelible, painful memory. Carlotta's death left him devastated. It was not only the loss of his beloved, but the destruction of a future they had dreamed together, a future that faded like smoke, leaving behind a deep emptiness and immense pain that would mark his life forever. It is said that he never exceeded his loss. The letters, those fragments of an impossible love, became their only consolations, in their most precious treasures. In them, he found the presence of Carlotta, the strength of a love that transcended death, a love that, although tragic, was as real as the same pain that consumed him. Imagine Europe in the 19th century, a melting pot of changes. Revolutions, industrialization, nationalisms, a convulsive scenario that marked Carlotta's life deeply. While she experienced a forbidden love, Europe was debated between the traditional monarchy and the new liberal ideas. The great powers, such as Great Britain, France, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, played a dangerous game of alliances and rivalries, a chessboard where the fate of nations was decided in palatial halls and battlefields. Prosody. Speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. Think about the social rigidity of the time, the pressure of the court, and the expectations imposed on royalty. Carlotta, a princess, was tied to a network of conventions and obligations that stifled their freedom. His relationship with Alberto challenged not only social norms, but also the political interests of real European families, intertwined for centuries of strategic alliances and dynastic rivalries. The pressure for a convenient marriage was immense, a tool to consolidate power and prestige. Romanticism, that artistic and philosophical current that flourished in the 19th century, exalted passionate love and individuality. But for Carlotta, this romanticism became a tragedy. His love faced the political and social reality of a Europe in transformation, where power and convention prevailed about personal feelings. In that context, its history becomes a symbol of the struggle between the heart and reason, between desire and duty. Think of Belgium, a young country, recently independent from the Netherlands. His monarchy, still unstable, staggered among the different political factions. The royal family, with Leopoldo I at the head, tried to strengthen its power, but the social tension was palpable. The divisions between Catholics and liberals, between Francophones and flamenco, threatened to tear the national fabric. It was a delicate scenario, where a small error could trigger a major crisis. The economy, still in development, suffered ups and downs that directly hit political stability. The differences between social classes were abysmal, creating a culture broth for popular discontent. The rumors of conspiracies and possible revolts were constant, generating an atmosphere of uncertainty that affected all levels of society, even the real family itself. In this unstable context, the image of the monarchy should be impeccable. Leopold I, aware of this, tried to keep calm, but the pressure was immense. Each decision, every false step, could have devastating consequences for the fragile unit of the new kingdom. And in the midst of all that chaos, Carlotta's personal life was intertwined with the country's political instability, adding a new level of complexity to his already tragic history. Imagine Belgium, a young country trying to find its place in the complex European chessboard of the 19th century. Leopold I, your king, walked carefully, aware of the fragility of his kingdom. His main concern was Belgium's survival as an independent nation, an objective that required skilled diplomacy and strategic alliances. Great Britain, with its powerful fleet and its global influence, became a key ally. The geographical closeness and common interests in maintaining the balance of power in Europe made this a fundamental relationship for Belgian security. Remember that Belgium's neutrality was a fine line that had to be maintained. France, on the other hand, represented a challenge. Its military size and power were a constant threat, although also an opportunity for trade and cooperation. Leopold I sailed between these two giants, always looking for the best strategy to protect Belgium's sovereignty. Any error could have devastating consequences. The balance was precarious. A false step could unleash a conflict that Belgium could not bear. The neutrality, although proclaimed, was an act of constant balance, a diplomatic dance that Leopold I and their court had to do with mastery to ensure the survival of their young nation. But Leopold I did not act alone. His family, the powerful house of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, wove a network of alliances throughout Europe. It was a family with an excessive ambition and an innate ability for political game. You see how his influence extended as a shadow over the young Belgium, shaping his destiny and that of his daughter Carlotta. Alberto's family, his future husband, was a branch of the same powerful house. Imagine the intricate network of relationships, strategic marriages, the power exchanges that occurred between the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. It was a clan attached to blood and ambition ties, and its influence on the Belgian court was undeniable. For you, it is key to understand that the influence of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha was not limited to politics. It extended to the court itself, to the most intimate decisions of the royal family. Alberto, with his lineage and position, became a key player in Carlotta's life, not only for love but also for the family strategy. Think of letters, private conversations, family gatherings. Everything was impregnated by the influence of this powerful family. His decisions, his strategies, and his ambitions molded Carlotta's future, even in the most private aspects of his life. You will see how this intricate family network played a crucial role in its tragic story. Prosody, speak. Speak, prosody rate equals 90%. Imagine Carlotta's life in that context. For you, as a woman of the European high society of the 19th century, marriage was your destiny. You weren't the owner of your own destiny. Your life was reduced to obedience to your family, first, and your husband, later. Your education focused on the arts, social refinement, and preparation for the role of wife and, eventually, mother. Your social role was defined by your husband. If he was powerful, you were also by extension. But if he was weak, your social position looked immediately affected. You did not have your own voice in political or economic matters. Your opinion only had weight in the domestic sphere, and often even there, it was limited. Financial independence was a practically non-existent concept for you. Your expectations revolved around maternity and maintenance of home. You were expected to be a submissive wife, a dedicated mother, and an impeccable host. Any deviation from the social norm exposed you to be considered a rebel, extravagant, or even dangerous woman. You must follow the rules imposed by society, without questioning them. Individual freedom was a luxury that you could not afford. Think about the stir that caused his death, Princess Carlotta, the fiancée of the future king, deceased in such tragic circumstances. A scandal in court. The murmuring extended as the gunpowder between the nobility. The press, although censored, could not avoid filtering some information, feeding speculation and morbidity. Society was divided between those who shared the pain of the royal family and those who saw in the tragedy a sign of the times, a sign of the changes that were coming in Europe. For many, Carlotta's death was not only a personal loss, but a symbol of the fragility of life and cruelty of destiny. His youth, his beauty, his promising future, all truncated unexpectedly. The impact on the moral of the time was deep. The role of women in society was questioned, their vulnerability to the circumstances and the lack of control over their own destiny. Carlotta's tragedy became a recurring theme in private conversations and literary works of the time. Imagine the shock, yourself, in the midst of that climate of uncertainty and mourning. The court, mired in pain, had to deal with the political consequences of the tragedy. Carlotta's death altered the succession plans, creating tensions and speculation about the future of the kingdom. The impact of his death resonated beyond the borders of Belgium, extending throughout Europe, reminding us of the ephemeral nature of the life and power of an unexpected event to change the course of history. Imagine the scene. An opulent funeral, a sea of afflicted faces in the Belgian court, but beyond the protocol and the official pain, what was in the hearts of the people? The story of Carlotta and his forbidden love became a legend, a tragic romance that transcended the borders of royalty and social conventions. His death, premature and mysterious, only intensified interest, turning it into a symbol of an impossible love. You can feel the resonance of its history yourself. That forbidden love, that passion that challenged the norms, that death that made it an icon of the romantic tragedy. There was talk of hidden letters, of furtive encounters, of a love so intense that even death could not extinguish. His story became a ballad, a song whispered in the palatial halls and the humble taverns. Think about how its history fed the romantic imagination of the 19th century. The love that knows no limits, a supreme sacrifice for passion, a death that seals forever an eternal love story. Carlotta became the archetype of the romantic woman, sacrificed, beautiful, and tragically in love. His legend still endures, a testimony of the power of love beyond life itself. Beyond the official mourning, you will ask yourself, who really was Carlotta? Not only a princess, but a woman of her time, trapped between the rigid rules of the court and her own yearnings. Imagine your childhood, surrounded by luxuries and protocols, but also with acute intelligence and an independent spirit that collided with the expectation of a passive monarch. Her education, refined but limited by the prejudices of the time, prepared it for a role that she herself questioned. The pressure of the family, the expectations of society, the weight of a crown that, deep down, did not want. She was a complex figure, a combination of fragility and strength, of submission and rebellion. Carlotta, despite his tragic love story, became a symbol of a woman who challenged the conventions of her time, although in silence, although with a painful end. His figure transcended the personal drama to become a reflection of the limitations imposed on the women of royalty in the 19th century. It was a princess who, despite everything, left an indelible mark on history. Prosody. Speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. I imagine you wonder how Carlotta is remembered today. Its history, marked by a forbidden love and a tragic end, has made it a symbol of passion and sacrifice. Despite the passage of time, its name continues to resonate, an echo in the halls of history, a whisper in history books. It is not only a real forgotten figure, but an example of a woman who challenged the conventions of her time. His legacy does not only reside in the pages of history books, but in the way in which his story has impacted us. Carlotta has become a fictional character, in a muse of artists and writers, inspiring works that explore issues of love, loss, and the fight against social norms. His memory persists through artistic interpretations, which give him a life beyond his tragic existence. Perhaps the true inheritance of Carlotta is his ability to remind us of the importance of authenticity and courage to follow the heart itself, even when it implies challenging social expectations. Its history invites us to reflect on the cost of love, the pressure of tradition, and the search for one's identity in a world governed by rigid norms. Despite his tragic end, his story continues to inspire. So, what is Carlotta's legacy? Its history, despite its tragedy, continues to resonate. She represents the sacrifice for love, an election that led her to madness and premature death. His life, full of luxuries and privileges, became a whirlwind of passion and despair by falling in love with Maximiliano, a man who led her to a politically dangerous adventure. His marriage, an attempt to consolidate the power of his family in Mexico, ended in disaster. Ambition, betrayal, and war, elements that defined Maximilian's fate, ended up dragging Carlotta into an abyss of suffering. His struggle for love and power, a love that cost him sanity, is a lesson in human fragility against political and historical forces. Maximilian's death, executed by a firing squad, was the final blow. Carlotta, plunged into madness, never recovered. Its history is a reminder of the power of love, but also of its ability to destroy it, a tragic end for a princess who risked everything for a forbidden love, a love that led her to ruin and immortality in the pages of history. Think about the weight of the crown, in the pressure of a real family that pushes you towards a marriage of convenience. Carlotta, despite his privileged position, yearned for a genuine love, something that duty denied him. Its history reminds us that even princesses, with their seemingly perfect lives, can suffer the anguish of a divided heart between duty and love. What would have happened if Carlotta had followed his heart? It is a question that leaves us reflecting on the elections we make in life and its consequences. His sacrifice invites us to assess the importance of authenticity and question the social structures that sometimes prevent us from pursuing our happiness. Carlotta's story is a tragedy, yes, but it is also a lesson about the cost of duty, about the search for self-love and the importance of making heart-based decisions, even when those decisions seem to go against everything expected of you. His story continues to speak to us, even today. Surely you wonder, who was Maximiliano? It was the Archduke of Austria, a powerful and attractive man, but also committed to his own imperial destiny. His marriage proposal represented for Carlotta an opportunity to escape monotonous life in Belgium, a possibility of greatness and a love that, in his mind, could overcome obstacles. And your marriage? It was a fairy tale initially, full of faze and pomp. But the reality of Mexican political life and Maximiliano's ambition soon collided with Carlotta's romantic vision. The pressure, loneliness, and stability in a country at war were undermining their mental health. Many people ask about their madness. It was not a sudden madness, but a gradual decline caused by stress, frustration, and tragedy of seeing how its imperial dream crumbled. Her trip to Europe to seek help was her last desperate attempt to save her husband and her common project. Finally, why did he die? His mental health was irreversibly deteriorated. The combination of trauma, loss, and constant pressure brought her to a chronic mental illness that, in the end, ended her life. Its history is a reminder of the cost of ambition and the fragility of the human condition. And now, we got to the part where I tell you where I took out all this information about Carlotta and Maximiliano. That I didn't invent it, right? I have consulted a lot of sources to make sure that I am offering you a story as accurate and complete as possible. My research was based on historical archives, personal letters, newspapers of the time, and biographies of both characters. It was a historical detective job, and I loved it. /prosody /speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. I want to especially thank the authors who guided me on this trip to the past. His works were fundamental to understand the complexity of the history of Carlotta and his tragic romance. You will find the complete list of books and articles in the video description, so do not hesitate to take a look if you want to deepen the subject. There is a world of information waiting for you. Remember that history is a puzzle, and each piece, each source contributes to the complete image. I hope you enjoyed this tour of Carlotta's life. A woman who challenged the conventions of her time and paid a high price for it. Do not forget to subscribe for more fascinating stories of the past and, of course, leave your comment. I would love to know what you thought. But wait, what if I show you something really special? I have had access to some unpublished images of Carlotta, photographs that are rarely seen. Some show the princess in her youth, radiant and full of life, before the tragedy of Mexico overshadowed her existence. You will see its beauty, its regal bearing, and you will realize the force it possessed, a force that faced the pressures of its time. In other images, we see it more serious, with a deep look that reflects the burden of the responsibility he carried on his shoulders. Look at the complexity of your emotions, the mixture of determination and melancholy that is reflected in your eyes. They are images that will allow you to connect with your humanity, beyond the historical figure we know. There are also photographs that show their daily life, more intimate moments that allow us to imagine their personality. You may be surprised to see your most casual side, far from the official portraits, but no less fascinating. They are snapshots that humanize their figure and help you better understand their history. Get ready to see a Carlotta that may never have imagined before. And speaking of special images, can you imagine how the music that Carlotta listened sounded? Imagine the palace halls echoing with the melodies of romanticism. Elegant waltzes, piano pieces full of feeling, music that reflected the complexity of its time. Think of composers such as Chopin or Liszt, whose works filled the concert halls and private halls. His pieces, so passionate and dramatic, surely resonated with the spirit of Carlotta, with his loves and dramas. Maybe even the piano herself touched them. Music was an essential part of courtly life, a form of expression and entertainment. Dance, operas, concerts, a sound world that today we can imagine thanks to modern recordings, but that in its time had a unique magic, an immediacy that new technologies cannot replicate. So the next time you listen to a piece of Chopin or a Viennese waltz, remember Carlotta. Remember that behind those notes, there is a world of emotions, stories, and a princess who lived a life as passionate as tragic. A life that, somehow, music can help you better understand. I hope you enjoyed this moving story. Carlotta's life was really tragic. If you liked it, give like and subscribe for more. What do you think? Leave it in the comments. /prosody/speak.